Today, we become legends.
So to start, I'll quickly bring you guys a review of the balance changes to the 10.2 update, because they've hit a lot of the most powerful items that I think is very good changes, and also some pretty spicy buffs as well. Kinsai's getting some really spicy buffs, so you should be seeing a lot more of that. So yeah, let's just jump right in. So first up, we've got a few just like general Conquest changes. Titan basic attacks will now hit multiple enemies in the area. This was actually in the 10.1 update, so it's been this way since the launch of the season, but they're just clarifying that is now how it works. So the green buff holder special ability is that it will heal all of the allied camps 20 health a second on top of 10 HP 5, does not heal himself. This is interesting, as this, I don't think this has been in the game since 10.1, and if it hasn't, if this is being introduced in 10.2, the triple camp start is 100% dead. Like, it was already kind of hard to do that, and you had to have really good clear. If this wasn't in the game and is now being added on top, triple camp start is just impossible now. Healing 20 health a second, like extra on top of that, like even the highest clear comps, like Izanami Sylvanas or something, probably don't even want to do triple camp start if this is a thing, because it's just going to take you so long, and like the minion wave will probably end up dying by the time you get there. The center of the fire giant pit is now permanently impassable terrain that blocks ground placement for walls, but allows targeting for abilities and projectiles. I don't really know what this really means. Like, were people just placing walls inside the fire giant that can't be destroyed? I assume that's why this is being changed. Pyromancer decreased initial spawn time from 10 minutes to 7 minutes. I like this a lot. Pyro is literally worse value than Gold Fury almost all the time, and yet it spawns later in the game. It kind of made sense to me. If anything, I think Pyro should spawn like before Gold Fury. Like maybe Gold Fury should be 7 minutes and Pyro should be 5. I know it's pretty spicy, but then you could potentially like set up for a Pyro fight early in the game. They can maybe even make Pyro a little bit less tanky if it's going to spawn at 5 minutes or something, I don't know. And you could try and get the bomb and set up for a Gold Fury and like snowball off of that. It could lead to a bit too much snowball potentially, because the bomb will out-secure anything on a Gold Fury fight if you get it like 5 minutes into the game. But I think it's interesting. I like to see the spawn time reduced, because spawning at 10 minutes, it just felt like it wasn't really much value to take the Pyro, especially considering that you clear the camp that is there, and then a bit after that is when it spawns, so it often spawned at like 12 or 13 minutes or something like that. So yeah, nice to see this spawn a little bit earlier. Should make for some interesting fights around that, and you could potentially like have the bomb ready for like Fire Giant maybe. You know, like I was saying with Gold Fury, but do it with Fire Giant instead, and then you can secure fire. It's very risky to do that, because taking fire at 10 minutes is very hard to do, but some potential for plays there. I do like this change. Buff holder no longer summons spirit minions for the blue buff. This is fine. I mean, it just means you're going to get wrecked by your blue buff a little bit less, because it also has those side minions now. So it had side minions plus spirit minions, and it was a little bit too much damage if you like mistimed your ability or whatever and didn't clear them and didn't have AoE basic attacks or something. So that's a fine change. Green buff now provides 10 MP5. Yeah, completely fine as well. Not a major change really, but supports to have a little bit more sustain there. And reduce the size of totem by 15%. I mean, yeah, it did seem a little big, I guess. So I love how they call it an NPC. Oh yeah, the totem is a non-player character, boys. Yeah, it's accurate, it's accurate. Right, moving into the item nerfs. First up, we have Druid Stone. They're just slightly increasing the cost, so it's a little bit less reasonable to kind of rush it, I guess. The tier 2 and tier 3 upgrades are going to be completely unaffected by this, so a very minor change there. Stone of Binding, not a minor change though. Instead of 5+1 per level, it's 0+1 per level. So not only is that reducing from 25 to 20 in the late game, which is a pretty big deal, it's also just going to be way less valuable in the early game. You know, if you were rushing this and picking it up by like maybe level 8 to 10 or something like that, that's like 33% roughly, maybe a little bit more than that sometimes, pen decrease from when you initially buy it. Definitely deserved. Stone of Binding was super powerful, not only on tanks to allow them to just have like extra pens so that their base damages hit like much harder on squishes in the late game, but I was even occasionally buying this on damage dealers, because the protections and health are really good, and it makes you like significantly more tanky against like random stray hits and stuff like that. But it also just gave 25 pen. It's like, why would I not want this? 25 flat pen is way more than like any of the standard damage item flat pen items give. So I was occasionally just slapping this in like my 5th or 6th slot in like maybe not necessarily a full squishy build, but on like some junglers or whatever, like a Raven or something like that. I would just buy this in my 6th slot because it was just really strong. So yeah, definitely deserved nerfs for Stone of Binding there. On to Contagion as well, definitely another item that completely needs nerfs. They decreased the damage from 35 to 25. This was originally 40, and they hotfixed it in update 10.1 bonus, I think. Originally 40, now it's down to 25, completely deserved. I was saying in the bonus update notes that it probably needs to go down to 25, maybe even 20 would be alright for this. Like, this item's completely insane. Or at least it was completely insane. I think now it's just going to be good. So yeah, fixing earlier hotfix, this stuff's already live. Each player can only have one aura on them at a time, so it's not going to end up stacking multiple on them. That's how it was supposed to work, but it wasn't working that way on initial launch. That's why Contagion was so busted on launch, like best item in the game kind of busted. If a player has a damaging aura, it's now refreshed, so yeah, it's basically part of this one. Instead of getting the next one, you'll just refresh the duration. And the damage aura no longer applies at CZ time, it just ticks every like second, so no change to like the actual overall damage there. It's just going to be slightly slower. to bring the damage out. And then just a couple of issues fixed here. Like this, I think Contagion's still going to be strong because it's still just a really efficient item. Like the stats on it are decent. Reducing anti-heal, not reducing anti-heal, applying anti-heal, reducing healing is always going to be good. And then the passive, it's still dealing 125 extra damage to them. And it's magical damage as well, I think. So it's going to be more useful for solo learners. I think this item's still really good. It's just not like going to be completely breaking the game anymore. I think this is a decent spot for it to be at. Maybe it could even be 20 and just make it a clean 100 damage or something. I think that'd be fine. Just because the item's so efficient, you know, not only is it prots and health, I think it has as well, it's also anti-heal and it's damage to the enemy when they hit you with a hard CC, which is going to happen all the time, especially in solo lane. Definitely a worthwhile change here. Prophetic Cloak is interesting. It's getting kind of a shift, I guess. So yeah, Prophetic Cloak, obviously a really strong item, but the reason it's allowed to be so strong, I think, is because it's a support item, and everyone knows, you know, support items, they're kind of busted because they get less gold available to them, so generally their items have to be more efficient for the gold. Thebes has always been this way. Thebes has always been one of the most efficient items in the game, especially tank-wise. And Prophetic Cloak is kind of joining that. Like, it's really not buildable on solo laners, to be honest. Like, maybe you can get away with it occasionally if you're doing a lot of rotating and somehow fighting both damage types, but it's mostly a support item, and that's why it's allowed to be so strong. But basically, for the initial version, they're decreasing the internal cooldown from 10 to 8 seconds. So in theory, if you are maximizing, this stacks 20% faster now. But in reality, it's probably not going to be 20% faster because you weren't always proccing it like on every 10-second cooldown. Sometimes you're more than that. So it might end up being relatively like maybe 10 seconds faster. Sorry, not 10 seconds, 10% faster to stack this like throughout the course of the game, which is nice. I mean, it does take quite a while to stack this thing up, so it makes sense for it to be a little bit easier to stack, I suppose. And then they're going to be decreasing the protections of both types on Evolved Prophetic from 55 down to 40. And this makes complete sense. You know, when this item was initially revealed, I assumed this was some kind of typo with it being 55 because the auras in Smite apply to you as well as like the other allies in the area. And so like the aura from this was applying to you, and you also got 30 bonus prots on evolution. So it was giving an insane amount of prots in addition to the damage mitigation that it provides as well. And so this item was just ridiculous. It made you so tanky. It gave you, I think, 85 prots of each, which is way more than any item in the game gives. You know, some items might give close to 85 of one, not of both. And also you got like, is it 15% damage mitigation, I think, after the nerf? So just a super efficient item. It's going to stack easier now, but you're going to get 15 less of each prot. So it's going to be a little bit less crazy when fully stacked, but it's going to be much easier to fully stack. And this is part of a bit of a theme in this patch. They're kind of trying to hit tank items for the most part, like mitigations and stuff like that. So next up, we have Sigil of the Old Guard that is getting destroyed, man. Destroyed. This is taking more nerfs than Bluestone and Warrior's Axe took. And Bluestone and Warrior's Axe were the much more popular of the 3 starter items on like the initial season launch. I think people kind of slept on Sigil because Warrior's Axe and Bluestone are the more aggressive ones, and they were making more flashy plays and things like that, but Sigil is being completely destroyed. The initial version isn't. Keep that in mind. The initial version is going to be exactly the same, so it's still going to be pretty good for like a laning phase item if you want to be like super tanky. But Sigil of the Old Guard getting completely destroyed here. So decreased base damage mitigation by 2% down to 3, and decreased mitigation per stack from 4% down to 3 as well. So it's going to be 12% mitigation in total instead of 17%, which is a pretty big deal. Down 5% mitigation. And then also they're going to decrease the healing per stack from 3% to 1%. So the base item gives 1%. So for upgrading this, you're getting no extra healing here. The healing is going to be exactly the same. You're obviously getting a little bit extra mitigations, or I think actually all extra mitigations. I'm pretty sure the base item just gives prots. But still, like, you're getting no increased healing from this. This is taking it down 67%. The amount of healing that you're getting, which is kind of crazy. And it's obviously because of the mitigation builds. We all know this. You know, if you've seen any Final K video in the last like 2 weeks, you've probably seen how crazy this is. But yeah, I mean, it makes sense. You don't want like 70% mitigation to be accessible like frequently in builds, because it is really unfun, because it's kind of like true damage in a way. Like, people always complain about true damage in Smite because it's completely uncounterable, basically. Like, you can't build protections to counter true damage, and that's really sad for the tank players that are just getting shredded by true damage. And it's the same thing for mitigations, but in the reverse direction. You know, you can't build penetration to counter mitigations because it doesn't work on it, and so that feels really bad for the carries that are trying to shred the tanks. And so I think you have to be just as careful with damage mitigation in the game as you have to be with true damage, and it makes sense that they're nerfing this down. To be honest, I would have liked to see this go down to like 2% instead of 1. I feel like this just really sucks that you get no extra healing on compared to the base item. But the damage mitigation nerf completely justified. Could have maybe even gone down to like 10% total or something like that. Definitely completely justified there. Also, Berserker Shield going to be going down from 10% to 5% on the passive as well. They're just trying to hit a few of these mitigation items, mostly the ones built by solo laners because they were mainly the ones abusing it. Supports were still getting mitigation, but they were getting a reasonable amount, like 20%, 30% tops, whereas solo laners were doing these ridiculous builds with like 50% plus damage mitigation, which is just very sad for damage dealers. You know, I mean, I'm a tank player myself, I'm all for a tank meta, but mitigation meta is not fun because damage dealers straight up can't counter this. Like, it's very different to, you know, someone building protections because you can counter that with percent pen. Speaking of percent pen, Crusher getting some nerfs as well. Decrease cost a little bit, so it's going to be a little bit more accessible, but decrease the power and also decrease the physical power scaling on the passive. Probably overall a nerf, but a very small nerf, I would say. You know, going down 100 gold to lose 5 power and 10% scaling on the passive, like, this is the main thing here. The 5 power doesn't really matter, but this 10% nerf here, you know, assuming you have like 300 power by late game, that's a 30 nerf on the damage, and a 25% nerf overall. You know, Crusher was pretty strong, I think, so I guess this is pretty justified. To be honest, I don't know why, I don't really like the change in terms of them making it cheaper, but worse. I like the fact that it was becoming a bit of a luxury item, because Crusher always has been a bit of a rush, and like not a luxury item. I kind of like that it was. But I guess they're trying to make it compete less with Heartseeker, which is the next change. Decrease the bonus damage from 3% to 2% when you have lower power. So basically, damage dealers, Heartseeker is going to be completely unaffected because you're always going to have more than like the minimum power requirement. But any solo laners that were building this, which I think it was a pretty good solo lane item before, as like just one damage item on like an ability-based solo laner, like a Cooler, Knocking Arthur or whatever. Nerfed down to 2%, so still probably going to be okay for solo laners, but for the most part, you're going to be wanting more power with it, and it's basically unaffected for junglers. And moving into the buffs, Horn Shard, this isn't technically a buff, but they're just clarifying something, so they say fix the text of the item to specify that it decreases CDR by 0.5 seconds every 0.5 seconds, so you get 3 seconds off of your abilities total. At the initial launch of the patch, it was listed as every 1 second, so it seemed like you were getting 1.5 seconds off of your cooldowns. In reality, you were always getting 3, that's always how it's worked. It was just mislabeled on the tooltip. And so this item hasn't changed. It's listed in the buff section, but it hasn't changed. This has always been how it's worked. And yeah, Horn Shard, I think, really strong. Always has been really strong. I think people probably weren't picking it up as much because it listed 1.5 seconds of total CDR, but it was actually 3. And so anyone that used it realized how, like, really strong that is. Like, it's basically upgraded beads, but you can have it from the start of the game, which is really good. One of the biggest buffs of the patch, probably the biggest buff, is to kin size. 5% more attack speed and bonus damage against high HP max targets from 5% to 6%. So another change in this patch that is clearly trying to hit tanks. I know we are in a little bit of a tank meta here, especially the biggest tank meta we've been in for a while. You know, it's been a damage meta for a long time, like a burst meta, and so it makes sense. A lot of the tank items are quite strong in year 10, and so they're going to be buffing this up along with nerfing some of the mitigation items to kind of counter that a little bit. Kin size builds are going to be super good now. Super good. We've been building crit for the most part, you know, last season and for the start of this season as well. And they are going to be buffing Bladed Boomerang down here, but this is just so good now. 25% attack speed, 6% on max HP targets. So yeah, Bladed Boomerang, decreased cost, increased attack speed, and also decreased the offset from the player that the buff drops to be 50% closer. So I've not really played with this item, to be honest. I've not played much ADC in general, and then when I have played ADC and built crit, I've just been building Rage, because Rage feels like just better than this item in general. Rage is really good right now. But this will definitely help it. Decrease cost, increase attack speed, and then this, I assume, will be useful. As I said, I've not used the item, so I don't know how far away they were actually dropping from you, but it'll be, you know, 50% easier to collect them. They'll be much closer to you, and you won't maybe have to put yourself out of position to grab them or whatever, so that makes sense. You know, maybe you'll be picking this up instead of Rage now, or maybe it'll be a bit of a trade-off depending on, you know, if you're a little bit less reliant on attack speed, maybe you have a really good attack speed steroid in your kit, you still build Rage to get that 100% crit chance in 3 items that you can get with Wind Demon, Rage, and Deathbringer. But if maybe you want a little bit more of that attack speed, maybe your attack speed steroid is weaker, or you don't have one in your kit, like maybe you're a Cernanos or something like that, maybe you want Bladed Boomerang more instead. Chronos Pendant getting just a 10 magical power buff, not really going to be that relevant. I mean, to be honest, supports are probably building this more than mid laners are building it at this point. So a little bit extra damage there, but yeah, I mean, if you liked Chronos Pendant and you're building it anyway, it's not like this isn't going to make you really want to build Chronos Pendant. It's like 10 extra magical powers, whatever. If you already wanted that, it's mainly the 20% CDR and the extra 1 second on the passive that you really want from this item. So basically, anyone that wanted to build this anyway, you get a bit of extra power. It's probably not going to make people build the item. Brawler's Beat Stick, decrease cost, fix the text to describe the buff field last 10 seconds, and increase the power that it provides, the base amount. It also provides some per level, up to 20. So yeah, this is nice. It definitely needs buffs, but I just feel like the effect is kind of trash. I feel like maybe they should add an effect where, like, after you leave the area, you keep the power for like 4 or 5 seconds. That would make it better, I feel like, because a lot of the time you're in a fight, you know, you're moving around a lot, you're an assassin, you dive in, you kill someone, you want to go dive on someone else, or you want to retreat, and you just leave the power field, like, almost instantly, and you get, like, no value from it. It feels like a really weird item to pick up, and it's actually made me want to pick up Brawlers less. Brawlers was, like, super good for junglers against, like, healer mids or just self-sustain in general. It's made me want to pick this item up less, because it's got an increased cost, but I guess the cost is coming down now. I don't know, I don't really like this item. I feel like they should add that effect where you keep the power for a little bit after leaving the field, and that would make it significantly better. Cloak tier 1 is just getting a slight cost decrease to make it easier to rush, I guess, as a support. You know, it's the same cost now, I believe, as Glowing Emerald, so if you're rushing Thebes, you get the same amount of pots now if you're rushing Cloak, so a little bit more incentive, especially with the easier to stack part of Prophetic Cloak. Now you can get it stacked earlier, and you can also get an extra pot when you're getting it as your level 1. Or maybe you don't want to build at level 1 because Cannoneer's Cuirass is getting cost decrease now. You're probably still not going to build this item, I don't think. It's a weird item because you need to rush it to get like a lot of the max value out of it, but you would just much rather rush Thebes or Prophetic Cloak, I feel like. And then if you're getting it later in the build, you're not getting as much value as you would really want from the passive. It is a substantial cost decrease though, and depending on how the numbers work out, maybe you can actually get a lot of extra farm from this, and maybe it's worth it. I don't know. It doesn't really seem that good. Dawnbringer down 200 gold as well. This could potentially make the item a little bit more viable. It was really too expensive for what it gave. Now, potentially could be good. Movement speed is really powerful, and this gives a lot of extra movement speed when you ult in. It's the same reason like Iron Dite is so good, and why I like Iron Dite a lot, getting that extra movement speed. Still not going to be like an absolutely crazy item, but maybe we'll occasionally see this on solo laners in like a 5th or 6th slot now, something like that. Absolution getting a buff of 10 magical protections and 10% CCR. I don't think this is going to change anything. If anything, it will just make players more incentivized to try the item out, but I think the main reason you're buying this anyway is for that cleanse aura, and that this doesn't change anything about that, so I think this one's just going to take a while, and probably until we see SPL play for us to realize if it's good or not, because this item's super hard to use, like really hard to use, and it requires a lot of very specific situations, specific gods to use it, and good players with those gods to use it. So I feel like when the SPL rolls around, we're either going to see that this item's crazy and everyone's building it, and the pros are like making good use of it, or we're going to see that it's complete trash and even the pros can't make good use of it. At which point it might need like more buffs or like changes or something. Phalanx increased physical protection by 5 and increased health by 50. It seems like, once again, Tyrannical Plate Helm was not good. Who could have guessed? I mean, I guess this is good, you know, it just helps you box in lane a little bit more. It's quite a substantial buff, 50 health and 5 prots, especially if it's an item you're going to rush, because that's like a percentage of your health and prots is larger because you're rushing the item instead of getting it later in your build. So it's quite a substantial buff, but I just don't know if you would ever want to rush this over a lot of the good soul and rush options that are available right now. Aokwang nerf, definitely warranted. 10% scaling down on the 3. Aokwang's been kind of dominating a lot with a lot of the good magical jungler items right now. Not magical jungler items, magical ADC items that Aokwang builds. Hebo nerf as well. Decreased power scaling and decreased base damage on water spout, so a double nerf on that. This is fine, you know, no one really wants Hebo to be on top of the meta, and he was doing quite well at the moment, so it makes sense. Discordia buffs, wow, decreased 2-second cooldown on all ranks on erratic behavior. That's very good. You know, decreased cooldown on this is like doubly decreasing the cooldown on her 1 and 2, because if this is up more often, your 1 and 2 are also up more often. And increased base damage on the apple by 25 at all ranks, and by 10% magical power scaling. So a big Discordia buffs, man. Wasn't it only like a few months ago where Discordia was one of the top mid laners at the end of Season 9? I guess she's just not performing that well with the Year 10 builds. I don't know, I feel like she might work okay with Tablet. I don't see why she'd be that terrible. So these buffs, I think, are probably going to catapult her into being a very good mid laner, to be honest. I think she was already pretty good. Geb getting increased base damage on his 2. Wow, Geb 2 does 380 damage? Or did 370? I didn't know it did that much, dude. That's a lot. So increased by 10 at all ranks and decreased cooldown. Going to help his wave clear and poking a little bit, I suppose. Tsukuyomi buffs, why? Who wants to see more Tsukuyomi? Not me. Increased shuriken damage by 10 at all ranks on the 1. So more poke, a bit more wave clear if you're using it for that. And Piercing Moonlight increased physical power scaling per dash hit. So you get 4 dashes, right? So that's a 20% power scaling increase overall. Piercing Moonlight already does really insane damage, so as a percentage of the overall damage the ability is doing, this isn't as crazy as it might look. But yeah, that's going to be doing even more damage. I feel like if you want to buff Tsukuyomi, I would do it in a different way to this, because this already hits super hard if you can land all of the hits. Jingwei buffs, don't think she needs them, but sure. Extra 5 damage per tick on the Persistent Gust, so this isn't on the initial hit, this is on the like little ticks that it does for people that stand in it. No god is ever going to stand in it because they get knocked away. They would have to run back into it and then stand on top of it, which not even bronze players would do. So this is completely irrelevant for god damage, but it does help for minions. You know, when you're putting this on the archers, especially early game, that's a 50% increase. And also decreased cooldown from 12 down to 10 instead of just 12 seconds flat. And you do rank this first, so that will be pretty relevant in the laning phase. More knockups, more attack speed, or whatever it gives. I think it's attack speed for Jingwei. Churno buffs, decreased mana cost. That's fine. Decreased mana cost from 70 to 50 all ranks. That makes sense. 70 is a little bit high. And then decreased cooldown as well. So mainly in the early game. The cooldown late game is going to be the same. So yeah, just a little bit safer. And a little bit, yeah, basically just safer. This mana cost isn't really going to like change too much. Basically, Chernobog is going to be a little bit safer in the new patch. And yeah, that's all of the changes. The God changes aren't really that crazy, except for maybe the Disco changes. I feel like Disco is going to be really good. Just some small nerfs and some small buffs and stuff like that. But the item changes I feel like are kind of crazy. Specifically, or is it kin size? Kin size, big change here. Bladed Boomerang could also be huge, depending on if it was like on the edge of viability or if it really wasn't that good. I haven't played too much ADC, so I don't really know on this one, to be honest. And also, this Sigil of the Old Guard is probably dead. This just seems like such a gigantic nerf that you just wouldn't want to build this over like Bluestone or Warrior's Axe. Maybe if you're a god that doesn't really make good use of either of those two, maybe you'd still go Sigil, and it is still good at the tier 1, but this is such huge nerfs, man, to this item. Such huge nerfs. And also, Prophetic Cloak changes are interesting. You're going to be a little bit less overall tanky, but to be honest, I think the main like problem with this item, if anything, was that it was too long to stack. It wasn't that once you get it stacked, it was too weak. It was insane when you had it stacked. So it's still going to be ridiculously strong when you have it fully stacked, giving like a lot of protections, but it's going to be much easier to stack as well, so. Yeah, interesting changes, pretty good changes for the most part, although a couple of them are a little bit questionable in my opinion. And yeah, what do you guys think of these changes? Definitely let me know down below. What changes do you think are going to be the most impactful, and what changes do you like and dislike, all that stuff. And I will catch you guys in another one later on. Have a great day, and peace out, you nerds.